Paul Westman, and I'm here to do another series setting breakdown. Today, I'm going to be discussing another young adult series called Please Don't Tell My Parents. This is a pretty fun series to read. Alright, so let's get into this. Alright, is Please Don't Tell My Parents series by Richard Roberts. It is technically an urban fantasy, but it actually falls under more of a superhero genre. So while technically is urban fantasy, it doesn't involve the same fantasy type creatures such as like goblins or wizards or everything. Instead, it's more superhero based. So more like The Incredibles or X-Men or something like that. Like I said, it is young adults. The main protagonists are in middle school at the beginning of the series, so be aware of that. The series length, it is currently sitting at 9 books. The first 5 books are kind of a complete arc in and to themselves, focusing around the main character, or at least one character of the series, who goes by Bad Penny. And also, the next is not as focused on Penny's arc, but rather it sort of gives us an insight into certain other characters. There's various protagonists in each of the books, although it is set in the same universe, and cameos are done by multiple characters from the original series. There is one prequel book, but it is not at all necessary to read to understand what's going on in the series. Alright, now this, it is set in a modern world. Like I said, it is similar to like the DC or Marvel Comics universe in that it is set in our world at our time. As for the location, it is based originally in the United States, and primarily in the city of Los Angeles, although it does travel around to a few other places throughout the series. Now, instead of the magic systems, we gotta talk about the superpowers. Originally, the superpowers are acquired through a few different means. Generally it's either genetic, in other words, like your parents had some sort of superpowers and they passed along to you. Sometimes now the powers that do get passed on are not necessarily a carbon copy of what your parents had. So while some parents might have like mental abilities that are psychic powers, the child won't necessarily have the same abilities. Sometimes superpowers occur through mutations, and sometimes the powers happen through magic. Either a spell cast on somebody, or they were messing around with some sort of magic and it blew up in their faces. So we have a variety of different origins for the powers. Now, as for the types, they can really be broken down into like about 4 different types. There's physical powers, people are stronger, faster, or might have some kind of physical mutation like horns or something. There's mental powers. Super intelligence is relatively common power. Then we have like psychic powers, the ability to move things with their minds, or to use magic of sorts. And then you have your technology-based powers, where somebody just like has really cool stuff that was invented generally by somebody with super intelligence. So, alright. Now for the political entities, here's where the series doesn't go too in depth as to the political entities, but there are a few that are sort of noteworthy, and mostly these aren't like organized groups per se, but rather very powerful individuals who have taken it upon themselves to enforce the rules of the society. First, we have Spider. Now, he is considered one of the most powerful, but not for any sort of physical attribute or anything, but rather because he is incredibly intelligent. He has plans that are in motion for years at a time, always plotting and always gathering information. Spider is generally known to use blackmail, and he's sort of organized the criminal underworld, or the supervillain society of this world, underneath his umbrella. He operates primarily out of Chinatown, and he has a deal with the superheroes called the Chinatown Truce. Basically what that is in Chinatown, heroes aren't actually allowed to operate, so the villains have free reign to do whatever they want. That's where they can organize, that's where they meet up, they have bazaars, they have shops. That's a base that they can use and basically exist in peace. Now, you wonder why. The primary reason to allow them that area is so that they have a place where they can meet up, and a place where they're guaranteed that heroes won't come in and cause a bunch of chaos and destroy a bunch of things and cause massive damage to the city, end up killing a lot of innocent people. So that is basically why the Chinatown Truce is in play. Next, we have what's referred to as the Council of Seven and a Half. We don't get too many specifics about them, like their purpose, their goals, but it's implied that they are a very powerful and influential organization within the supervillain community. Then the last person that really has the most influence in this world is a person called Mourning Dove. Now, she is sort of like a zombie slash vampire undead creature who essentially can't be killed, and yet is capable of like draining people's life force in an instant. Now, she is technically considered a superhero in that she doesn't go around breaking the law all the time. However, she acts in a more similar role to like the Punisher in the Marvel comics, where she is far more violent, far more aggressive, and she generally does not leave survivors behind her. So she is like considered the ultimate boogeyman in the world. But her main purpose is to sort of enforce the one major rule within the entire superpower community. Now, the reason for this rule is because of someone called Deadly Flame. Now, what happened with him is in 1976, he was considered a supervillain, but what happened is he robbed a bank or something. It was not necessarily a high-level, vastly important crime, but the police, they decided to take matters into their own hand. They found an informant, and they used that informant to discover the identity of who Deadly Flame was. And once they did that, they went to his home and attempted to arrest him. And because of him being a superpowered individual, and they were just regular police, they didn't really stand a chance, and he ended up killing 6 of them in the assault. Now, with his identity having been exposed and the police coming after him, at his own home, he realized that he didn't really have any reason to hold back anymore. So what he did was he decided to go out in a blaze of glory. And that allowed that basically in his rampage, he killed over 100 civilians, and before he was finally killed himself. And so after that, there is one golden rule in the superpower community, and they call it don't get personal. That is something that is repeated throughout the entire series. Basically, and what it really means is the superheroes, they have their superpower identity and they have their civilian identity. And as a superhero, you can go after them, you can clash, you can fight, but outside of that, in their personal lives, if they're not challenging you, then you leave it be. You don't get personal. And like I said, Morning Dove is the one who really enforces that rule beyond what anyone else does. And she essentially can't really be killed because she is already undead. So there is no way to really defend against her. And she enforces that rule with impunity against the superheroes, against the supervillains. And so that is why everyone is willing to abide by these rules. Because nobody wants to die, and everybody really prefers to have the safety of and the anonymity of their own identity outside of their superpower. So, and another rather important historical context throughout, it's referenced multiple times throughout the story, although we don't really get very many details. It is what is known as the Conqueror Invasion. The Conqueror Invasion was an alien race decided to invade Earth, but not like through direct military power, but rather through sort of an infiltration and sneaking in, ambushing. And like I said, we don't really get too many details because the invasion itself was considered to be, or was swept under the rug, so to speak, And also, it is very heavily implied that heroes and villains were willing to work together during the invasion. So, it did happen relatively recently in the story, although we, like I said, we don't get exact dates. And this alien group, they didn't like fly ships into our atmosphere, but rather they used like portals and robots, some high tech lasers to sort of sneak in through a back door, essentially. All right. And like I said, while it is not directly stated, it is heavily implied that heroes and villains either work together directly to repel the invasion, or at the very least, they called a coordinated truce so that way the heroes could repel the invasion itself. Because it's clearly not in a villain's best interest to allow an alien invasion to conquer the Earth. So, and now we're gonna get into really the spoiler free of the first 5 books. Like I said, the entirety of the series doesn't actually stick to a single story, so to speak. And the latter half of the books are various people within this same sort of group. Now, like I said, it is originally set in Los Angeles, and I did say it's a young adult story, and the characters are in middle school at the beginning, specifically Northeast West Hollywood Middle School, which I do find a rather funny name for a school. Now, our main characters are Penelope Ack. She's the daughter of 2 retired superheroes, and they both have mental powers. And basically, the story is about her sort of discovering her own powers, and she becomes a mad scientist, which is sort of just a general designation of super intelligence focused on inventing things. And then she's got 2 friends, Claire Lutra and Ray Viles. Claire is also a daughter of sort of a woman that's based off of Catwoman. So she does have a superpower in this series, but it's less physical and more of a sort of a psychic ability to influence men's minds or distract them. And Ray, he actually does not have a power at the beginning, and instead he gains some abilities through an invention of Penelope's. So basically, the initial story is Penelope is very young, she's very impatient, and she's always wanting her power to sort of develop, or at the beginning she's trying to discover what her power is. Her father has a brain mutation that sort of allows him to understand any sort of invention or mechanical device and be able to like reverse engineer it. So he has a super intelligence that way, whereas her mother has a superpower involving statistics and predictions. So, like I said, both sort of mental superpowers. So she's expecting also mental superpower. And when she does finally discover her powers, it seems to be a lot more powerful than what anyone around her suspects. And she tries using like her initial invention in a science fair, but there's sort of a contention because some people don't believe that she actually invented it, and then there's other students in the class who clearly have connections to other superheroes and were essentially putting forth things that they clearly had nothing to do with in the science fair, and they were getting all the praise. And sort of in a matter of childish pique, what happened was these three who want to initially be superheroes, they crashed the science fair after hours, but then they're confronted by a superhero sidekick who just sees three people in costume trashing a science fair, so they end up beating up a superhero. So they end up essentially becoming supervillains, sort of accidentally. And the first book is essentially them kind of developing their personas and their reputation as villains. So it's rather entertaining. One thing the book does really well is it does separate the hero-villain spectrum from the good and evil spectrum. So basically, not all heroes are good, not all villains are evil. It's more like how they deal with the law and go about doing what they want in that manner. So it's a fairly good story. Series develops pretty well, and the first arc is basically one complete story. So you don't necessarily have to, but it's enjoyable to like see other perspectives throughout this world, because it's a fun world to go through. So that'll be it for this week. I will be back next week with another series setting breakdown.